Okay, good day. This chapter here is on reproductive behaviors. This should be relatively shorter. There's two modules to this chapter. One is on sex and hormones, and the other is on variations in sexual behavior. And we're not going to really discuss too much about variations. We'll skip most of that, but at the very end of that module on variations, we'll discuss the differences between the people's gender, I guess you say their sexuality and interest at the end. But for the beginning of the chapter, really it's about the brain and how the brain is operating, and how do we involve hormones in the context of discussing sex. So in general, as the book first begins, it has a reference point that the reason why we have hormones and sex is to create genetic variation. Can't all be the same. In order to proliferate and continue on, we have to be different. So it helps us to adapt to our environments, to have different genders, sex, hormones. So we have different flavor in life to reproduce. So for sex and hormones, for men and women, and just the reality of chromosomes, so we have 46 pairs of chromosomes, 23 pairs, which makes 46 altogether when they come together. And the last one that makes it to 23, the sex chromosomes are what we're talking about. So 6 chromosomes on the chromosome for people. So males have an X and a Y. Females have an X and an X on the chromosome. So it's the male who determines the sex of the child from a chromosome perspective. So the book does discuss organ systems, the Wolffian ducts, the Mullerian ducts, their development in terms of the reproductive organs depend upon the levels of hormones that are there early on. I'm not going to ask you to get too deeply involved in the biology of that, but it's the chemicals in the brain that are causing those formations of the reproductive organs. So for the male, we have a penis that develops. The female has a clitoris that's almost like a small penis. You have the urethra, the uterus. Males, that's different, and testes. So we have different organs that are developed, and it's the hormones at very early stage of development that causes the organism to develop into being male or female. By default, most people are developed into being a female. Testosterone helps a trigger to make the organism go to a male. So if we deal with male and female hormones, we know males have androgens. We consider those testosterone. Females have estrogen. We consider that estradiol. So androgens males, estrogens females. There are steroid hormones. So if there's anything key and critical to recall and remember from this chapter, steroid hormones have powerful influences on behavior. Steroid hormones, they're almost looking like if you took a teaspoon of sugar and dumped it into an Olympic-sized swimming pool, that minute amount in that large area is how those hormones are having an impact on behavior. A small amount can influence behavior. And so when you think about just the diet and the things we consume, steroid hormones all have a certain shape, a certain structure. It says right here, 4 carbon ring structure is the base. And there's some extending like hydroxyl groups and oxygen groups that are on that chain that cause it to be different. So depending upon the diet, there's some things that can actually interrupt what those hormones look like. So the backbone, as you see up top there, showing the structure. Then the second one there is cortisol. Cortisol from the adrenal glands. That deals with stress, but it's a steroid hormone. So it's a steroid hormone that is involved in helping your body fight through a stressful situation. Look at the structure of it. Cortisol looks just like that. Third one there, testosterone. Fourth one there, estradiol. And actually, testosterone goes on to make estradiol. And then progesterone. All of them have that backbone with the different methyl groups or oxygen groups or, hydroxyl groups on the side make the chemical different. And look at this. If you think about your diet, you consume cholesterol from your foods. It's good cholesterol, it's bad cholesterol. So not all cholesterol is bad. The low density lipoproteins are the ones that sit in your system, not too good. High density lipoproteins, like the cholesterol, good for your body. So when you go get your health report, you have those two balanced, LDLs and HDLs. The point is that cholesterol is important for your diet. It makes chemicals. For example, here, cholesterol actually makes progesterone. Progesterone then makes your testosterone. Testosterone can then be made into two other chemicals. One is 5-DHT, one is estradiol. What you'll see later on in a little discussion here as we deal with the hormones is enzymes that convert and make the chemicals pass on to make another chemical. So for estradiol, the enzyme is called aromatase. Aromatase, ASE enzyme. So aromatase is the chemical that converts testosterone into estradiol. Didn't think about that, huh? Testosterone can also make 5-DHT. DHT stands for dihydrotestosterone, but the chemical that's involved here is called 5-alpha reductase. Different enzyme. You notice the enzyme is ASE, different enzyme making DHT, different enzyme making estradiol. So the point is, you can have your hormones can be influenced by beginning chemicals. Things that you put in your body can be influencing your state of your hormone balance. Some chemicals will be endocrine disruptors. That means problems with foods we're consuming, let's say through plastics. Perhaps you've seen plastic bottles that says BPA free. BPA. BPA stands for bisphenol A. It can be a chemical that's bad for the body. It can act as an endocrine disruptor and alter your hormones. Another chemical to think about that can have an impact on your system without you think about it is soy products. Why soy products? Because they are considered to be phytoestrogens. Let me draw that real quick in case you don't know what that term means. Phytoestrogens, plant-based estrogens. So phyto, plant-based estrogens, things like soy. So if you think about it, there are things in our diet that can sometimes influence the state of our hormones, and so we then start to wonder why there's some fluctuations over time, and that can be problematic in terms of trying to process what's going on in a person's body. It can be medicinal, helpful, but it can also change the nature of what's going on internally. So as we move forward with the slides, Steroid hormones have powerful effects. Those effects could be genomic or non-genomic. Genomic means it's affecting the gene. Non-genomic means it's just influencing the cell. So the genomic is actually getting into the cell. It's the outside of the cell, the membrane, getting in and altering the nucleus, let's say, of the cell. Non-genomic may be on the outside, just affecting the receptor. So genomic or non-genomic. So hormones can have very powerful effects in that context. So again, the classification for male hormones is called androgens, classification for female hormones is called estrogens. Progesterone is a very important chemical to initiate the uterus to be ready for implanting the egg. Helps promote pregnancy, so progesterone is very important. For two effects, I would like you to remember organizing and activating effects of hormones. Here's the distinction. Organizing in the womb, as the fetus is developing, the organizing molecules of the steroid hormones helps to make the organism develop to be what a male, develop to being what female. So it's in the womb organizing that. Activating effects is pretty much after the womb and can be occurring in different stages of life. So puberty is an example. As you grow and develop, with your hair that may be forming in different parts of your body. For female, breast gets large. So male voice gets deeper. So those are activating effects of hormones. So for the sexual differentiation, most depends on the level of testosterone in a sensitive period of time. That's the key. Because again, by default, we're females, but the testosterone in a sensitive period causes people to develop to be the male. The human sensitive period for genital formation occurs during the first trimester of pregnancy. So anything could be occurring during pregnancy, from stress to putting the wrong things in the body in terms of drugs, that can all impact the developing fetus. So organizing effects. It's known that female rats exposed to testosterone during the sensitive periods become partly masculinized in anatomy. Wow, so even in animal studies, we can show there's some disruptions. There's a brother named Tyrone Hayes, has some very important videos that discuss atrazine and some chemicals that are used as pesticides, and looked at them in frogs and fish and showed that there's real changes in the physiology of those animals as a result of those chemicals being emitted in the water. Not only this is a controversial research, it's controversial because the companies don't want you talking about that. But here we have an example of, again, in animal studies, you change the levels of testosterone at some early stages of development, it's going to impact how they operate. So organizing and activating effects, please know that. Sex differences. I want you to remember that even though we say that there is, is there a male brain? Is there a female brain? Yeah, there's studies discussing differences. Is there male behavior, female behavior? Yeah, there's definitely studies discussing those differences. In the context of sexually dimorphic nucleus, morphic, both sides of the brain. There's an area that seems to be a little bit larger in the hypothalamus in males and females. So there becomes a certain place that is known to be why there's stereotypic behavior in animals. And then talk about people. So if you see this hypothalamus area bigger in males and females, explains why males have certain behavior, females have a different behavior. So animals have a stereotypical way of reproducing. Rodent may go into a lordosis, that is, the animal's body becomes rigid, the other male mounts, and they reproduce. Same way, stereotypic. Humans don't necessarily reproduce that way, they reproduce by doing other things because there's more creativity in the mind of a human being. And so the hypothalamus, though, does display about what a female will present sexually and what a male may present sexually. So Won't go to it extensively, but there's this chemical called alpha-fetoprotein that's found during this changing sensitive period. It says alpha-fetoprotein is found in the blood during early sensitive periods, binds to estradiol, prevents it from entering developing cells. So this is where there's a distinction why that levels of testosterone won't then make a female or male, because it depends upon this protein keeping and binding the testosterone, the estradiol. So testosterone does not bind to alpha-fetoprotein that freely enters the cell. So those changes as a result of chemicals that are causing the organs to go to being a female or going to be a male. Just thinking about that. So are there differences in girls and boys? Of course, but we have to look at the environmental context of you give a boy a car, you give a female a doll as they're growing up. So does that mean now you're training them to be in a certain way? Possibly. But the brain, is the brain different? Possibly. All these things are factors that we can't just, pigeonhole like it's only going to be this way, but we have to look at the differences in how they do develop. So in the discussion on activating effects, again, we're speaking about different time periods in life. And if we talk about activating effects, sex hormones between male and female, we need to talk about sexual behavior. So in males, we can say testosterone is a driving factor. Okay? So if it's a driving factor, we also have some other hormones that are associated with the pleasure of even having sex. One chemical known as oxytocin is elevated in people after intercourse, elevated, but it's usually associated as a female hormone. So oxytocin comes from the pituitary gland, particularly the posterior pituitary gland. It's associated with female parturition, that is uterine contractions to relieve a baby, labor contractions. Also with milk release in terms of the mammary glands to release milk. A child suckles on the nipple, information goes to the brain. The brain sends the chemical down to the nipple to release milk. That chemical is oxytocin. So we now have some triggers that can make a male do what he does or a female do what she does. So again, males, testosterone. The area of the brain that kind of bind receptors for testosterone and hypothalamus are the medial preoptic area of the hypothalamus and the ventromedial nucleus of the hypothalamus. These are areas that contain a lot of testosterone, and as the testosterone circulates, or receptors, as the testosterone circulates, it gets into those receptors in those areas, and that then stimulates male behavior. It triggers the release of dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that makes you feel good. It's the euphoric response. So dopamine is involved. Testosterone levels, the lower the levels of testosterone, less interest in sex. The whole big craze about Viagra and all those male enhancement drugs are all about, again, those who have maybe something called impotence. Impotence, the inability to have an erection. So it could be psychological, could be physical. Either way, there are medications that can make the penis get erect, and in that context, you have arousal. So low testosterone could also relate to low blood circulation, and believe it or not, perhaps you did not know, but Viagra used to be a blood pressure medicine. The side effect was erections. So in that context, they then marketed it, and now you have a whole new area of drug studies dealing with male enhancement for erections. So the issue is testosterone is a driving factor, and we have people that are to be deviant, like sexual offenders. Do you just castrate them and take away their testosterone? That doesn't necessarily work, because it's a mental thing why people may be acting in these power dynamics, having these being sexual deviants. So it may not necessarily work like that, but people have thought about castrating people who are sexual deviants to stop them from committing acts like rape. On the level of castration, have you ever heard of what a eunuch is? E-U-N-U-C-K. A eunuch is a person that has had their testes removed early and their voices changed. They also become bigger than other people. So in that same context, I've castrated hamsters in the laboratory, and those hamsters who are castrated are also much bigger than animals who are intact, that have their testes intact. So the hormones being removed has a dramatic impact on the whole physiology of the organism. So for a female, we know that there are different times of the period of her cycle that they are more receptive to sex. So there should be a 28-day cycle. We should be following a female cycle to deal with the whole cosmos. It should be 13 moons. Every 13 moons, every 28 days is 13 moons. So we should be following that kind of calendar. But in the midst of the cycle, there are different things that happen with the levels of hormones that are being excreted and then as they come down. So you look at this figure here. Some chemicals you need to know are luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. So LH, luteinizing hormone, FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. Down the bottom here is the lining of the uterus in blue. So day one, it's lined, but then there's nothing going on and it gets lined a little bit heavier. As the lining of the uterus is changing, chemicals are changing. Right here, estradiol is flat, progesterone is flat. But as they increase, now making the female more receptive, you have luteinizing hormone may increase, follicle stimulating hormone may increase. That's now causing the lining to increase. As the lining increases, it's now being receptive for our egg to be implanted to now be ready for reproduction. So the chemicals that are being emitted are causing the change in the body. So LH, FSH, hormones coming from the hypothalamus, or pituitary rather, pituitary, because there's chemicals that release then in the hypothalamus, pituitary, and then release into your bloodstream. And then you recall that for females, in the ovaries is where the estrogen is being produced, and in the males, the testes or testosterone is being produced. As we move forward, you can read through these slides on your own to look at the ways that the FSH and LH work. Different times of the period of the month, we said that female may be more receptive. Also, there may be something called premenstrual syndrome, where females feeling more irritable or pains in their body, in the stomach area, as a result of what the hormones circulating. Beyond premenstrual syndrome, there's also something called postmenopause. So again, you can look at the figures on your own about how the egg is implanted, released from the ovary, but implanted in the uterus, how the chemicals are involved in that. But again, if over time, you now lose your estrogen, is no longer working anymore, now you have something called menopause that can develop. So birth control pills can, as a developing woman maturing, birth control pills can alter those chemical mechanisms to not allow the egg to be fertilized. That's all it's doing. So for the menstrual cycle, again, there's different time periods where sexual activity is higher, and it's usually related to the ovulation. And then doesn't discuss menopause here, but again, menopause is when there's no longer estrogen being circulated. So as we spoke about earlier about hormones, perhaps some people could say they could take soy products like phytoestrogens, which can now naturally deliver what they're losing. That can happen. Hormone replacement therapy has not really been encouraged by a lot of people. Some people say that makes it worse. That can actually also trigger cancer. So there's different ways that people have monitored their way of trying to deal with menopause, but the reality is sometimes you can ride it on out. And I'm not saying I know how to do that because I'm certain how what female. So the last part of the chapter, I said to not worry about the variations in sexual behavior. However, I would like for you to look at the end of the chapter. You know what? Yeah, the end of the chapter, but in this context here, there is some connection to vasopressin receptors and whether or not an animal can be monogamous or polygamous. Monogamous meaning having one mate, Polygamous meaning having more than one mate. And so you have these voles, V-O-L-E-S, these animals that have been studied. Some are called montane voles, some are prairie voles. Some live in the mountains, some on the prairie and open. So depending upon which animal and whether or not it has certain kinds of receptors, it could be developing to be monogamous or polygamous. That's an animal. Not saying that fully respect happens in humans. The point is to think about the level of receptors and hormones, how they circulate, and how they can have an impact on the animal's behavior. Even the issue of parenting. That whole mother-child bond comes from the oxytocin. So the child's not coming out being connected to the father, it's coming out being connected to the mother. Oxytocin as a chemical can help stimulate that connection. So those who may lack it may have an impact of maybe not being involved in child care. And here's a study again showing the different levels of the vasopressin in the brain as a result of, different interest in mating. So the variations in sexual behavior, like I said, you can skip through most of that, but when you get to the end of the chapter, there's a discussion about changes in the brain as a result of being a homosexual for a male, and whether or not there's something in the brain that's different. As the chapter concludes, it talks about the interstitial nucleus of the anterior hypothalamus. So again, we're back to the hypothalamus again. So in conclusion, so we're dealing with sexual orientation at the level of the brain. So when we say interstitial nucleus, brain anatomy, so differences are shown between a male heterosexual and a male homosexual in comparing their brains to females. So on average, the homosexual brain is shifted towards the opposite sex in some, but not always the same. Older studies, post-mortem analysis, so without confirmed, you can't really say, but there are studies showing that the area of the brain is the interstitial nucleus of the anterior hypothalamus. The homosexual men tend to have larger anterior commissure, and the suprachiasmatic nucleus is also larger. SCN of suprachiasmatic nucleus deals with circadian rhythms. Slightly larger third interstitial nucleus of the anterior hypothalamus. So the differences, so if you look right here, it says these are a lot of cells here, smaller cells on that side. So the changes, it said that the brain of a homosexual male may look like a female brain when you compare it to a heterosexual male. So if we're going to discuss any changes that could occur, rather than speaking about cultural influences, societal influences, person's background, experience, all that can have an impact on a person's orientation. But from an issue of talking about biological psychology, all we're speaking about again is the possibility for the hypothalamus to show brain areas or anatomy that may be different, causing people to be having an interest in a certain sexual orientation. So again, the chapter on sex and hormones pretty much defines our discussion on chemicals and how they influence the development of the body. Okay?